Hey, let's talk about games. So, what's up guys? Welcome back. Today we're going to be doing a Wrath and Glory video again, but this time a little bit more hands-on. We're going to be going through specifically the character sheet, the combat, how the game works in terms of a little bit more rules. Think of this like a introductory tutorial. Obviously this is not the full game. We're still playing with the sort of the demo trial version we have thus far, which is only about 40 pages, but it has enough rules to really grasp how the game works, what happens within it, how things function, and some of the basic sort of gists of the game. So let's get started, talk about what I like, what I dislike as we go. So far, actually, I have to say it's pretty much all stuff that I really like. So we've got Inquisitor Yamala here. She is an interrogator of the Inquisition, and down here we can see her character sheet, and we've got a bunch of stats. Now, this sheet is your reference for this character, is obviously that's what it's here for, but these numbers are pretty much all you're going to need to come up with most of the calculations during combat. It's really, really simple. So all we'd do, let's say we're wanting to make an attack against an enemy, something beautifully simple. If we go down to her ballistic skill here, and we see that is 3, and she has an associated agility of 4. Basically, the two added together will be in this column here and will be 7. So 7 will be the amount of dice you get to roll to achieve this task. Now, when attacking someone in this game, you'll be rolling that 7 dice and you'll be trying to meet the target of their defense. The average character seems to have a defense, even enemies as well, between 3 and 6, something like that. There is also a maximum number you can have of a certain characteristic per tier. This is tier 3 gameplay, and I believe the maximum characteristic or core characteristic is about the 6 mark, so it does look like you can't go much higher. So if you're very good at combat, you'll have a fairly good chance at hitting them. So let's say we're going to do this now and try and hit them. We're going to have our 7 dice, so what we'll do is we'll bring up our roll 20 here. Right, so now we've brought up the D6 system within Roll20, so we're going to be just using this to demonstrate how this works. All we're going to do is hit enter here. We're going to roll our 7 dice. There we go. And these numbers basically determine how many hits you get. Now, this is not 29 hits. The actual total is not really relevant at all. A 2 and a 3 will be a miss. We'll come to ones in a moment. 2 and a 3 will be a miss. A 4 and a 5 will be a hit, 1 hit. And a 6 will be 2 hits. Or let's not call them hits, let's say successes. So within here, I've got a 4 and a 5 and a 4 and a 5. So that's 4 successes, and I've got a 6. So that brings me up to 6 successes, okay? So 4 from the 4s and 5s, and then another 2 from the 6. And that carries me over the threshold, let's say, of hitting a demon who has a defense of 3. So I'm way above that. That's great. I really hit them. Now, Dark Heresy would have a degrees of success feature. This has exalted icons. So the 6, which is sort of highlighted in green, is now, and if you can afford to do this, you can move that 6, which counts as 2, remember, into the damage. It won't count as a 2 in the damage. It gives you an extra dice in damage. So let's explain. If we go down here to the, let's say, the chainsword. Let's go with the chainsaw. Why not? It sounds much better. So this does a base damage of 9 with 1 extra dice. But we've shifted that 6 over and across into this. So what we have now is actually 2 extra dice. And this isn't 6 extra damage. I wish it was. This will be 1 extra damage because 4s and 5s count as a 1. Hopefully you guys are with me with the whole dice system now. There is an added complication to this. One of these dice, whenever you do one of these rolls, will be called a wrath dice. And this will basically be something awesome if you roll a 6, and something bad if you roll a 1. And this can be up to the narrative choices of the player and the GM and the DM or whatever to come up with something that kind of makes sense. So, for example, our group in our last combat rounds, we had a few complications that arose on these dice. We always go with the last one. You could go with the first one. You could come up with a macro that rolls it separately. Doesn't really matter. For our ones, our weapon got stuck in the demon we were trying to kill, and we had to do a strength test to pull it back out again. You could go with falling over on your ass. You could go with being thrown over, tossed into the distance. You could be, be creative, do whatever you like. But this is a really, really cool system. And straight away, I love this because even if you're fighting an enemy and you have, let's say that enemy has a lot of parries, so they got quite a high defense. You'll notice my chainsword down here, if we scroll down a little bit, has parry on it, which gives me +1 defense in melee. Now, even if an enemy hits you, if you've got a high defense, they will have less spare dice to transfer over. So a character with a higher defense will take less damage by not allowing the enemy to transfer as many dice. So even if they still hit you, it's not like Dark Heresy, which is a binary parry or not parry at all. In this, we actually have a chance for that parry, even if you still got hit, to having, it will have had some effect. So tanky characters will be more tanky even when they do get hit, and it also means you have alternative routes of protecting yourself. So you might be squishy, low toughness, you might not be able to take many hits, but you might at least be able to be highly defensive, good at parry, which will mean the hits you do take won't deal as much damage. Hopefully you guys are with me thus far. So thus far, we've rolled our extra +1 damage. So we look at our chainsword. That does 9 normally, so we've done 10 damage. Now, we go over to the resilience here. And that is the accumulation of toughness and defense. It really doesn't like highlighting one at a time, does it? And this is basically what you will take that off of. And as per usual with Dark Heresy. So we've got 10 damage, -6, 4 damage in total. Okay? Sounds simple. You would put 4 damage on your character? No, not yet, not yet. We got another mechanic now. A really cool one where fatigue in Dark Heresy 2 always felt like it was a bit on the sideline for me. It always felt like it wasn't really a contender in terms of core mechanics, let's say. So now we've got soak and shock. Now we can roll three soak dice. We're going to take 4 damage. Let's roll our 3 soak dice and I'll tell you how that works. So first off, we'll roll these dice. There we go. And we didn't soak anything. Let's roll them again, just for the sake of... Whoa, that was far too many. There we go. Oh, wow. Okay, so with this, we've soaked all 4 damage, because the 6 counts as 2, remember. So we've soaked all of that damage. That doesn't mean that damage goes nowhere. That damage now goes into your shock. Okay? This is really interesting. I really like this mechanic, because... shock basically turns into an extra wound pool, provided you've got a good amount of soaking dice. And believe you me, demons have 7 soaking dice, so unless you're going to do, like, I don't know, 15 damage, it's going to be quite hard for it to get through. But there's a little bit of RNG, so they might take a little bit. It's quite good, though. I really like it, because my character has now taken this and they've put it in shock. By the way, whenever you opt to shock or soak something, you take 1 shock automatically. So I actually take 5 shock here. So pretty much most of my shock, I've gone from 7 right the way down to 2 now, but my character hasn't taken any wounds. My not very tough character with only 6 resilience, bearing in mind an Astartes has 11, has just shrugged this off because she's a total badass. And I really like this mechanic. Yet again, we have another way to allow another layer of complexity and depth to allow the characters to actually move damage and absorb damage and mitigate damage in different ways. So it's not just about armor and toughness. We've got different stats that actually impact what you take. So this is really, really good. Love it, love it. There are, of course, other rules. And of course, we don't have the full rulebook yet. So if we look at the full rulebook, when you do a charge, you'll get a bonus dice. If you do an aimed attack, depending on where you're aiming, you may get another 3 dice to hit. That's 4, but you know what I mean. And this will depend on where you want to aim. So they've got a lovely system where you get 2 bonus dice, but +2 difficulty, which basically raises their defense by 2. Or you could have +3 dice and it raises their defense even more. So it's a very nice system where you say, I want to try and stab him in the eye with my pick. I don't know, what 40k pick. Yeah, sure. And that will give you the extra dice to hit. If it's an enemy that is, let's say, very low defense, but very, very tough, that actually makes sense, because it's going to be quite easy to hit them. They've got a low defense, but you might as well go for a hit in the eye, because let's say the defense is 3, okay, it will go up to 4, 5, 6, not that bad, but you'll get an extra 3 dice to try and achieve that in damage. It's one thing I didn't explain. That dice instantly goes straight to damage, not to hit. Otherwise, lowering their defense and getting the extra dice kind of cancels each other out. So I would say I want to stab you in the eye, I'd roll my normal dice, and if I do manage to stab him in the eye, then I get extra 3 damage dice. Holy moly. So that's another way you can influence this. You get 2 dice for going all out. So if you're doing a melee action, much like Dark Heresy, you can just do an all out and you'll get an extra 2. And a really cool feature. I really like this, guys. I really like this. If you're in melee with a pistol, you use weapon skill. So no more are the days of ambidextrous ruining our lives. If you didn't play Dark Heresy, you had to spec like a mother trucker to be able to use 2 things simultaneously and do it effectively. This game has a much better rule system for this, much better rule system. So straight away, you can actually just be a close combat specialist. Yeah, you could have a pistol that you're semi-competent with. Ballistic skill, for example, would be, even if you didn't have good ballistic skill and you had good agility, that would still help you hit it. Another thing I really like about this game, you can actually combine the 2 stats. So I might be pants with weapon skill, but I might be really good with tech, and that might balance it out so I can still hit stuff. Sorry, initiative. I might be really pants with weapon skill, but I might be really good with initiative, which will allow me to still hit stuff in melee, which is a really cool way of saying, well, actually, I don't want to waste resources in this, but I can spend them on this, which will still benefit me, and it will still benefit this thing. So much nicer to have 2 options to benefit your role, rather than just one. And yeah, it's just straight away a much more forgiving system. Really like it. Going back to the ambidextrous sort of thing, you can do multi-actions or multi-attacks, and this is another system which is a beauty. Let's say you can only do a certain amount of things per turn, because that's the traditional. You can move and you can attack. That's kind of how these things work. Or you'll do one big thing, which might be like a full disengage, where you step out from combat, but he doesn't get to attack because you did it as a full action. Bit like Dark Heresy, much like Dark Heresy. These things still apply, but you can add extra actions into this. Oh my god, but it makes them more difficult. So you can actually do, let's say you've got a reload that's going to take you all damn turn to do. You could do that, and you could then shoot, but it will raise the difficulty of all the actions to make that happen. So this also applies to melee. So let's say I've got a pistol, I've got a chainsword, I can attack with both. The enemy just gets +2 defense for each, and that is an amazingly nice and simple system. I've never seen the reason why Dark Heresy punished us so much for wanting to use 2 weapons. Like, this is my left hand, this is my right hand. I haven't had to get a PhD to use the 2 simultaneously. Even as a bloke with a Y chromosome, I am able to operate these 2 things independently. Look at that. But the game makes you just spec so much. Dark Heresy does, sorry. And that always triggered me, because it was impossible to make a melee character that could also fire a pistol in melee in accordance with canon. But this game does! So straight away, we're all going to be running around, and you'll see most of these characters do. We've got your Mullah here with a chainsword and a pistol. The Commissar has pretty much the same thing, only a bolt pistol, lucky bugger. And there's lots of this and lots of opportunity for this. Love it, really good system. Killed it, nailed it. Another thing now, really awesome thing as well, is there is another way to attack without dealing damage. Whoa. Sounds complex, but it's not. If you are a RP, if you are a real role player, if you don't really like making the combat-centric stuff, you can still help in combat. And what you can do is you can use things like deception to do a deception attack. You can use tech to do a tech attack. You can use all sorts of different things to make different attacks. And how this works, you can make intimidation attacks too. And you can do one of 2 things with this. One of 3 things, sorry. You can make an enemy more vulnerable, which will lower their defense, and then any extra 6s that you roll. And the same thing applies. So let's say I'm doing a deception. So in the purpose of roleplay, let's say I feint to the left to make him try and swing a sword over my shoulder, allowing my ally to come in and jab him from the side. That could be a thing. And so you'd roll those dice against his defense. If you pass, his defense is lowered by 1. If you get any extra 6s to move across, his defense goes down by another 1 per each one, which is going to allow your ally to hit a lot more, which will allow him to move more dice across, which will allow him to do more damage. So it's a really cool feature. In the purpose of tech, you could quite easily say, I don't know, you spot a loose wire in his armor and you bink, pull it out? I don't know. Be creative. But you can do things. So that's one of the things you can do. You can lower his defense. You can also hinder him, which makes all of his tests harder. So let's say he needs to roll to hit you and you've got a defense of 6, it would go up to 7. Let's say he wanted to use a psychic ability, the difficulty would go up 1, and you could do the same thing, same test, same mechanic there. If you get 3 dice you can move across, you also get a bonus, an RP bonus. So you could say, okay, I went to pull that wire out, I actually found the power supply to his power claw, and the orc's wrist goes limp. And he can't use it for forever. That might be a bit OP, but you know, obviously GM discretion is obviously going on here. Now, one system I've been alluding to right now, which makes all of this a little bit more complex, is the glory system. Now, if we go right the way down to here, you can see what we can do with Wrath and Glory. Now, Wrath and Glory are 2 separate pools. Think of them a bit like Fate, and we're a bit like Fate and a mini Fate. So Wrath itself is used to re-roll all failures on a test. You get 2 Wrath when you start. Another one for doing a bonus objective, and another one if the GM wants to be nice when you're doing amazing RP. Now, you can also get +1 to a defiance check. That happens when you die. We'll cover that in a moment. And you can also make a narrative declaration. Give you an example. Bad guy getting away. Not going to give any spoilers. Bad guy was getting away in our latest round, and he was gaining ground. I used one of these dice to figure out a shortcut. Found the shortcut. Got ahead of him. Wham! Bam! Cut his head off. Heretic down. And yeah, so a lovely opportunity to actually feel like you've got some control over the narrative design with this, or narrative events. So another example they give in the book or within the Bell of Lost Souls stream is enemies are charging towards you through a doorway, and you could use one of these dice to bing, smash the button, watch the door come down, and bang, you're safe. So that could be another option. Obviously there's loads. Now Glory is really interesting. These dice, these exalted 6s we've been moving across, once per action, you can move one of them into a dice pool for the group, where you can accumulate these dice and use them for different things. And this is basically like a reserve pool of extra damage +1s to tests and things of that sort. And it's a really, really cool feature. Really, really cool feature. You've got to remember to do it, and you can't accumulate them doing simple tasks. If you're shooting an enemy and it's a normal enemy and it's gonna die, you could probably shift one of the 6s instead of damage into your glory pool, only one at a time. And if you do get a 6 on the Wrath dice, it always gives you a glory, and you can still shift it as well, which is awesome. So 6s, lots of 6s everywhere, and it encourages you even to roleplay more, because if you're doing a tech test and you get to shift the dice, that can go in your glory pool. It doesn't have to be combat related. And these things can give you +1 dice to a test after you do any rerolls. So basically, if you used a glory and you then wanted to add another dice in, sorry, if you used a Wrath and you'd still failed and you felt, crap, I need one more dice, I think that's how it works. I could be wrong. You can also use it to seize the initiative, which means you go first in a round, and you can also make it to do a critical hit and deal more damage. Let's quickly go through the round system. It's very simple. You basically alternate with the GM, but everyone has to have a go in a round before it ends. So it's basically the same as the Necromunda tabletop. So typically a player will go first unless the GM expends one of his resources to go first, his special ruin resource. So you'll go first and you get to nominate a player. I really like this system because it just makes a lot more sense. If you've got an Astartes there, let him throw a grenade first. If you've got someone that's about to get jumped on by an enemy, let them run away. You can negotiate as a group. Obviously, you're going to have to do things quite quickly. But if you want to just roll a dice to see who goes first, you can do that too. There's no set initiative mechanic where you're going to get screwed over by RNG. I really like this. I know some people I've met with, talked with and played with haven't been quite as fond of this. It does take away a little bit from the fluidity, but I think once you get used to playing as a group, you'll get a little bit of a feels for how you want to do this. And the very last thing I'd like to touch upon with regards to how this works, the character creation, we don't know everything yet, but what we do know is that when you make a character, You can buy upgrade packages for them. This seems to be one of the little progression routes for them. So for this Inquisitor in particular, they purchased the sort of Ordo Xeno package as such, which comes with a couple of things. It allows her once per session to contact her Inquisitor for information, equipment, or a favour, which is really a really cool narrative tool as well. That's one of the things I really feel about this game, is there's lots and lots of narrative prompts where there's great opportunity for roleplay, rather than just having abilities focused around combat and, I don't know, about giving you bonuses to dice. Some of these are actually just roleplay for a second and get something cool, and that's a really, really cool thing. I really, really like it, and it does seem that these characters also each have some great opportunities for this, even including the objective mechanic which comes with them, where you basically roll a dice and that will be your objective, and you'll get a bonus wrath dice when you complete this objective. And again, this is all just encouraging a little bit of roleplay. I really, really like that. I find the complication mechanic when you roll the ones to be brilliant as well. It's also worth mentioning that when you do ordinary tests, say you're doing a tech test and you get a few ones, there's 2 or 3 complications. That could be it takes some more time to do. It could be that you it can be purely roleplay. It doesn't have to hurt your character. It could just be you fumble and lose a grenade. I mean, you can. This is sort of there seems like there's no set rules. There will be a card deck out for complications, so it could be something where if you're feeling brave, you can just draw a card. But this is something down to the group. But again, I feel like this game is really geared towards giving groups a lot more prompts in terms of roleplay. And as a group, we've played through this once. Again, sadly, the recording is corrupted, so we can't upload it. But we will be starting the full campaign as soon as the book comes out, so a few weeks. This game really encourages the roleplay, and we had the best roleplay session we've ever had because of some of these features, not only in terms of game design, not only in terms of character design. I mean, we were playing characters that we didn't necessarily pick. We were just like, yeah, I'll go with that one. But you know, we didn't design, sorry, and yet it's a lot easier to roleplay because a lot of this is so geared towards it, and I love it. I find the dice system brilliant. I love the way it gives extra opportunities to do mitigation, to do extra damage, to do, you know, to just have different routes to get somewhere rather than being limited. And it makes the characters feel like they can all contribute. Our only boss battle that we fought against a semi-elite creature, it went on for quite a while. It did drag on, partly because we didn't and forgot about using glory at the time, which could have probably killed it in a couple of rounds if we'd sort of unloaded all of it. But it actually felt like a boss battle. No more of this sort of everyone's getting one shot by it, waiting for one of us to one-shot it, which is normally what Dark Heresy does. Much, much more of a actual boss fight. So guys, hope you've enjoyed the video. Hopefully this gives you a little bit of an insight into the rules, and I will see you next time. Probably the next time we talk about this will be maybe the start of the campaign, maybe the session 0. But if you do want any other videos on this, do let me know, because I'm more than happy to talk about any other rules, experiences, things like that you fancy. We'll go from there. Guys, take care. All the best.